situation is where the President of the United States, who is a convicted criminal and who has been indicted on federal charges, is firing the FBI director for the stated reason that the FBI director conducted a search based on probable cause found by a United States district judge to search for stolen, secret, classified documents that he hid from the FBI and lied about. Yeah. And then, lo and behold, the documents were right where the search warrant said they were. So this seems a bit, it's me. It's all about Trump. Yes, he has the lawful power to fire the FBI director, but let's see him do it, and let's have him explain that it was all about him and the fact that he committed a crime and he got called out on it.
George Conway didn't explode on camera. He detonated Trump's political reality with silence, precision, and surgical truth. This wasn't a rant. It was a televised exorcism. A man once tethered to Trump's inner machinery through marriage, now calmly dissecting him on live TV like a failed experiment. Every word Conway delivered felt premeditated, like a closing argument from a prosecutor who's seen too much. This wasn't the usual anti-Trump echo. It was betrayal from within, and not by a rival, by someone who once had a front-row seat to the rise and rot of America's most chaotic presidency. And now, with icy restraint, he flipped the switch and exposed the system from the inside.
Stage 3 is basically where we are ignoring laws and running roughshod over laws. I mean, they're basically refusing to spend money appropriated by Congress, which is against the law. The law requires the president to spend money. The president can't not spend the money that's been allocated for particular subjects. And you've got this guy who's not been appointed lawfully under the Constitution.
Let's talk about that.
Musk. Yep. And so that's stage 3. Stage 4 is going to be, well, these courts are telling me not to obey orders. Why should I? I don't want to obey the law, so why am I obeying the courts? And stage 4 is metastasis. Stage 4 is when democracy can die, and the rule of law can die, and constitutionalism can die. And we unless something happens radically, I can't see how we don't get to stage 4, because the logical path that they are taking, which is that the law doesn't apply to us, and nobody can enforce the law against us.
Yeah. Conway's words weren't speculative, they were clinical. He described Trump not as a man out of control, but as one precisely calibrated to manipulate chaos. This is not incompetence, Conway said. It's deliberate disorder. Every controversy, every outburst, every scandal, according to him, wasn't a mistake. It was a maneuver. Trump doesn't stumble into messes. He manufactures them, because in mess, he can play victim. In confusion, he can call himself a savior. Conway revealed a cycle of destruction designed not to fail, but to feed off the fallout. And when a man thrives in dysfunction, leadership becomes secondary. What matters is dominance, even if it means scorched earth behind him and silence ahead.
He can't help himself but emotionally react to things. But one of the things that he's a narcissistic sociopath. That's the thing everyone has to kind of get used to. It's the reason why you cannot normalize him. You cannot treat him like a normal human being, because he's not. He is unwell. And that's why he can't follow. He's not going to be able to follow his lawyer's directions. That's why, he played right into the plaintiff's hands in the E. Jean Carroll case. They're trying to show basically he's a jerk. And what does he do? He acts like a jerk right in front of the jury. He shows disrespect for the jury. And, the fact of the matter is he's saying, oh, none of this ever happened. Well, okay, where's your testimony?
The most devastating part wasn't what Conway said. It's how many Republicans knew it all along. The quiet ones aren't innocent, he warned. They're complicit. Conway exposed the cowardice behind the suits, the nods, the closed-door loyalty oaths. The truth is, many in Trump's party didn't believe the lie. They just needed it to win. Conway's voice didn't rise, but it pierced, highlighting the rot within the GOP, not as a fluke, but as a feature. Trump didn't brainwash them. He gave them permission to ditch facts, dismiss norms, demonize institutions. And Conway wasn't just talking about politicians. He was talking about voters, too. Those who saw the storm coming and still handed him the matches. Gee.
The other thing that he did was to show that this is his modus operandi. He intends to, he's willing to use the threat of violence or to incite violence in order to coerce government officials to either forego enforcing the law against him or to, violate the law as he sought to have Pence and members of Congress do on January 6th.
Conway didn't stop at Trump's personality. He cracked open the machinery of power behind it. This was never about governing. It was always about control through confusion. Conway described a man who turns institutions into props, allies into echo chambers, and crises into campaign fuel. Every policy Trump botched became a performance. Every indictment, a merchandising opportunity. Conway painted Trump as a man allergic to accountability and addicted to chaos, not to escape it, but to weaponize it. He doesn't dismantle institutions, Conway said. He discredits them. Because when people stop trusting anything, they'll believe the man who claims to be the only one left standing, especially when that man's only real promise is revenge.
You've got the sociopathy, the narcissism, the pathological narcissism, and the Machiavellianism, and then the sadism. He wants to see people suffer. He wants to see them squeal, including the people who voted for him.
Then Conway cut into Trump's most sacred illusion, the empire. The towers, the gold letters, the bankrupt casinos, all of it, Conway argued, was smoke and mirrors. He's not a builder. He's a borrower of trust, Conway said, and he repays that trust in ruin. Businesses collapse, partners vanish, charities dissolve. The pattern isn't coincidence. It's the model. Conway laid it bare. Trump doesn't innovate. He imitates confidence, projects wealth, and leaves ashes. But what made this exposure terrifying wasn't the financial fraud. It was the replication of that fraud on a national scale. He used the presidency the way he used investors, Conway said. Sell the dream, drain the resources, walk away before the debt hits. And now, America's the investor.
I mean, this is just insight into the mind of Donald Trump. It's basically like if you took someone's brain and put it into a blender.
Sure.
And then just pulled out neurons randomly. But he's got probably about, all his neurons basically say about 5 things.
Right.
I'm great. I won the 2020 election. Sleepy Joe. Hillary.
That's when Conway pulled the thread on the cult of loyalty surrounding Trump. He demands silence, not support, he said. Conway described how Trump filters out reality by creating bubbles of submission. Everyone from former aides to sitting senators must pass a simple test. Will you contradict him, even slightly? Fail, and you're out. Succeed, and you stay, at the cost of your credibility, your profession, and your dignity. Conway argued this isn't politics, it's behavioral conditioning. Trump doesn't build coalitions, he builds compliance. Conway's conclusion was chilling. This isn't a political movement, it's a dependency trap. And the longer people stay in it, the harder it becomes to tell truth from strategy, loyalty from surrender, and leadership from submission.
They don't want to obey laws, they don't want to obey rules, they don't think they apply to them. And Donald Trump has no moral conscience and no empathy. He does not care about anybody else other than Donald Trump, which is why in his first term he said, Article 2 lets me do whatever I want, Article 2 of the Constitution. The first Trump term, which I call Shit Show 1, was an assault on the rule of law, but it was only like it was like cancer. It was like a stage 1, maybe stage 2. We got to stage 2 right around January 6th, and he was a threat to the rule of law. And then he went into remission.
But then Conway turned inward, and things got personal. He revealed that watching Trump break the country was one thing. Watching it fracture his own family was another. His voice didn't crack, but the weight of the cost was unmistakable. You can leave an administration, Conway said, but you can't walk out of your own house. He described the years of watching his wife defend a man he knew was dismantling democracy. The arguments, the press battles, the viral headlines. But what haunted him most was what it did to their children. And in that moment, Conway pivoted, not from politics to family, but from strategy to survival. Trump divides everything he touches, he said, even homes.
One of the enduring mysteries of the political world has been how longtime Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway and her husband, George Conway, who became a vociferous critic of Donald Trump, survived the Trump presidency and beyond. Well, now she's out promoting a book about her time in the White House, the last chapter of which starts with this line, "Democracy will survive, America will survive, George and I may not survive." So, of course, you can guess the very first topic broached during her visit to The View was this.
I think what happened with George is to make very clear, George does not owe fealty or loyalty to Donald Trump or any political ideology. The vows were to me to love, honor, and cherish.
All right, we get the vows, but George regularly and very publicly taunted her boss. But she says, still, she could not have done it without him.
And I would not have been able to be Donald Trump's campaign manager to the level I was had George not said, you are taking your shot and I will help more with the kids and around the house. I have watched men in the Republican consultancy dismiss and denigrate and deride you for years. This guy can actually win with you. Go take your shot.
So he initially supported her and she took the shot. And soon thereafter, George started taking his shots, assailing Trump day after day.
At the epicenter of this unraveling stood Kellyanne Conway, the trusted Trump whisperer who sold his delusions with a straight face on every network. Alternative Facts wasn't a gaffe, it was a doctrine. George never attacked her directly, but he didn't need to. The subtext was devastating. She became the voice of Trumpism inside their own home. Conway explained how his wife wasn't just enabling a dangerous man, she was translating his chaos into policy. The lie lived in my living room, he once hinted. And it wasn't theoretical anymore. Their private life had become a proxy war for America's public breakdown. The disintegration of truth wasn't abstract. It was sitting across from him at the dinner table.
But I gotta get to this. There's a whole chapter in the book, which you know I've read.
Yes.
But George doesn't tweet. When he first tweeted, you thought he'd been hacked.
Yes, I did. I literally did, because Sean Spicer came to me and said, did you know about this? And it was a George Conway tweet 5 days after George had taken his name out of consideration for a very big job he had accepted with President Trump to head up the civil division of the Department of Justice. George had already gone to see his office. He was already interviewing staff for that position. He was all in like I was for Trump-Pence. And I said to Sean, but George doesn't tweet. You know, in 2016, known as the year of the tweet, George Conway sent 0 tweets. He's now sent over 100,000. He can change his mind about Donald Trump. This is a free country. George owes no allegiance to a political party or a presidential candidate. But his vows to me, I feel, were broken because we were all in. You know, I also write in the book, Michael, that people like to say without Kellyanne Conway, Donald Trump would not have gotten elected president of the United States. That's debatable. But without George Conway urging, if not insisting, me, his wife, to take that campaign management job and helping out more with the kids and with home, I don't think I could have been the campaign manager to the level I was.
But the most unfiltered reaction didn't come from George or Kellyanne. It came from their daughter, Claudia Conway, who detonated the family drama straight onto TikTok. While Trump raged on Truth Social, Claudia was on social media pleading for emancipation, calling out her mother and labeling Trump as a fascist. "He's a monster," she posted during the peak of the administration. George watched as his child echoed the warnings he'd been shouting to America, only in the rawest, most viral way possible. Conway never used her as a prop, but he acknowledged what her rebellion represented, the generational rupture Trump had ignited. When your teenage daughter publicly begs for protection from your own household, that's not politics. That's what national gaslighting looks like up close.
Basically, my mom is Kellyanne Conway. She works for Donald Trump, and she just tweeted that she is leaving the White House. And my dad tweeted that he's leaving the Lincoln Project, which is basically Republicans against Trump. So they're leaving their jobs and like whatever, which is like for me. So I tweeted about my emancipation yesterday, which is kind of just a coincidence. Which is really frustrating because my parents were talking about divorce and they were supposed to get divorced, but I'm assuming that now they're not because they're scared of me emancipating myself, which is really unfair, but I guess that's life. And now their case is going to be a lot stronger against mine because, you know, they left for family reasons. But I can tell you, being their daughter, they don't give a shit. Like, they don't give a shit. My dad doesn't care about me. He's never cared about me. He probably doesn't even know my middle name, which is really sad, but it's true. You know, he never really cared about me my whole life. He always belittled me when I was younger. My dad physically abused me a lot, right here in this very room. And my mom, the same thing with my mom. You know, my mom got me arrested. You know, she's very, very physically abusive, very, very verbally abusive. I've been belittled. and badgered my entire life. And I just said this to them,
By the time Kellyanne resigned, the public damage was irreversible, but the emotional damage had already metastasized. Conway hinted that Trumpism didn't just tear the country apart, it rewired personal identity. When ideology becomes identity, losing faith feels like losing self, he said. Kellyanne clung to power. Claudia clung to autonomy. George clung to truth. And all three were pulled in opposite directions by one man's gravitational collapse. That's the cost Conway wants the nation to see, not just indictments or impeachments, but how Trumpism erodes logic, love, and loyalty all at once. Because when a presidency can turn a marriage into a battleground and a daughter into a dissident, what, Conway asked, might it still do to a country?
After Donald Trump won in 2016, your name was floated as someone who might work in his administration. You turned that down, and
I was offered the job of head of the Civil Division of the Department of Justice, and I filled out all the forms. They ran my background check, and I was interviewing people who were going to work underneath me. I was sort of far along there, and then I just started having this queasy feeling like I don't really want to work in this administration, because what I saw was a shit show and a dumpster fire. And I just got to the point where I just couldn't do it, and so I didn't. And I was one of the best decisions I'd ever made. Okay, I admit I was wrong to support Donald Trump in 2016. I was horribly wrong. It was a horrible exercise in judgment. I knew better. I should have known better.
After exposing his own home's unraveling, Conway circled back to the national stage and warned that what happened behind his front door was now happening across America. It starts subtly, he said. Families stop talking. Neighbors stop trusting. Facts become insults. Conway described how Trumpism isn't a platform. It's a filter. It demands you see the world not as it is, but as he needs you to. Reality is no longer shared, he said. It's segmented by allegiance. And when truth is tribal, democracy can't breathe. That's the real emergency. Conway wasn't predicting collapse. He was saying it already began, quietly, culturally, internally. And now the damage is no longer reversible, only confrontable.
What do you make of all of this? Is Donald Trump panicking, or is this all a part of the shtick that I think it is?
Well, I think those two possibilities are not mutually exclusive. As you say, he's not a normal man. He is a narcissist, a pathological narcissist, a malignant narcissist, a narcissistic sociopath. You can use any of those terms interchangeably. He is panicked and terrified. And narcissists live in panic and terror that their true selves, their true inadequacies will be revealed to the world. So they create this false image of themselves, and they lie and they brag and they say things about themselves that aren't true, to e.g. George Santos. And at the same time, they want to make themselves the center of attention. So yes, he is absolutely putting on the old shtick of trying to get as much attention as possible and trying to raise money off of it and get the grift off of it. But the fact of the matter is, he is terrified.
Then came the legal minefield. Conway didn't gloat over Trump's criminal indictments. He dissected the reaction to them. The fact that a former president faces 91 felony counts is disturbing. But what's worse, millions think that makes him a martyr. Conway warned that Trump's genius wasn't in escaping justice, but in turning prosecution into propaganda. Every court date became a campaign stop. Every gag order a megaphone. He weaponized the justice system without ever winning a case, Conway said. Because for Trump, the point isn't vindication, it's victimhood. Conway compared it to authoritarian playbooks. Twist the law until its enforcers look like the villains. And once that happens, accountability becomes optional. Truth becomes tactical.
Tara Schreckman wants to know from you, George, do you expect Trump to target you and other staff of the Lincoln Project? And if so, do you have a defense plan?
I don't have a defense plan other than whatever he pulls up is going to be meritless. My finances are simple. It won't, I don't fear him. And I think one of the things that that people don't quite understand about Trump, but they really should, is the fact that he's a bully and he wants to pick on people who won't fight back.
By now, Conway's voice had flattened, not from exhaustion, but from conviction. He described Trump's influence not as a political anomaly, but as a contagious psychological condition. He's not just narcissistic, Conway said. He's contagious. Conway argued that Trump rewires people, makes them mimic his cruelty, mirror his paranoia, Adopt his vocabulary. He doesn't lead movements, he said. He replicates dysfunction. The mega base doesn't just echo Trump's words. They imitate his pathology, mocking victims, demonizing critics, justifying violence. Conway's warning was blunt. We're not dealing with a political figure. We're dealing with a psychological feedback loop. And if it doesn't break, it will multiply. With every election, every outrage, every unchecked lie.
You don't want to diagnose him, but I think if you look at the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, he fits every single one of them. It's like the criteria were made to describe him. And I think what we saw with this tweet yesterday is that last final collapse of Donald Trump's mental state. I mean, you think about it, those were like 50, 60, 70,000 people in the aggregate in five rallies in different states. That's loopier than saying that the moon landings were staged, because there were tens of thousands of people were there. To think that is crazy, and to try to sell it to people is just as crazy. He's done. His brain is fried.
And then Conway delivered his most jarring line yet. If Trump gets back into power, he won't rebuild anything. He'll punish everything. No slogans, no platforms, just vengeance. Conway predicted a presidency of retaliation against journalists, prosecutors, military officials, even former allies. He's not trying to serve the nation, Conway said. He's trying to settle scores. And the horror is not just in what Trump might do, but in how many will help him do it. Conway warned that the next time, the guardrails may not hold. The judges might flinch. The system might crack. Because the last 4 years didn't teach Trump restraint. They taught him the blueprint. Finally, Conway left the audience with a brutal question. Not about Trump, but about the people still pretending he's misunderstood. You've seen behind the curtain, he said. You've heard the tapes, read the indictments, watched the meltdowns. And yet, the myth survives. Because myths are easier than admitting you were wrong. But Conway's tone wasn't bitter. It was urgent. You don't need to be a psychiatrist, he said. You just need to look. Look at the corruption, the collapse, the cost. The scariest part, he warned, isn't Trump's madness, it's our tolerance of it. And that silence, that collective shrug, might be what history remembers long after Trump is gone.